How about it for a Pulitzer Prize winner and co-founder of DCReport.org? He's a multiple best-selling author, and when it comes to Trump, he really is without peer. He's been chronicling Donald Trump from the earliest days of Donald Trump for years and years before anybody really even saw Trump's relevance in politics. He's now a professor at RIT. He joins us on Tuesdays, the great David K. Johnston. Hey, David.
Hello, Mark.
So there's a lot to get to. And the first thing I wanted to get to was something that I found alarming, and I hinted at where it might go in the last hour. And the alarming thing is the armed militia that were identified in North Carolina as hunting for FEMA recovery people, to the point that FEMA had to pull back their recovery people out of safety concerns for them. And I was saying that I thought the next front for those militia people who are animated by this Trump rhetoric is at the polls and associated with the election. I wonder if you could comment on what's going on in North Carolina, that rhetoric, and maybe what I had said as well.
Well, the Clive and Bundy type folks, he's the rancher who thought it was an offense that he was supposed to pay fees for grazing his animals on federal land. They're not very politically sophisticated, much as they think they are. And they have not been successful in getting people elected to office, I think with some minor exceptions in minor offices in Oregon. So I'm not particularly worried about these people at the ballot box, but I think they do pose a significant danger in other areas. Why would people who are armed want to go after FEMA workers? Well, because they believe this nonsense that FEMA is giving people scrip, not even cash, scrip worth $750, and then seizing their land in return for that. And that's just nonsense. But unfortunately, we're living through this ability, because of social media and the internet, of liars, of crazy people, to spread nonsense. And people who don't have critical thinking skills, people who aren't thinking about the future and who have grievances, they're going to, at least some of them, react to this, and some of them are going to react to it in ways that are both violent and dangerous for others, like the FEMA workers, but also going to essentially, like many of the people on January 6th, throw their lives away. And if I'm sounding apoplectic, because I am, there's no way to get past this without time. There has to be some time that's going to pass. Donald Trump has to fade sort of in the background. People who have behaved like the one fellow who's been arrested, but apparently had a number of confreres, have to get long prison sentences. And some people will be energized by that, but I think most people will get the message, this is nonsense, and if you commit a crime, you go to prison.
They passed a law, just give me the truth, is saying, I think it was Arizona, he says, that allows voter intimidation of worker and voters at the polls under the rationale of free speech. I don't know if they spoke about voter intimidation, but there is a loosening of what you can do when it used to be, David, and maybe it still is everywhere, if you show up to the polls with a gun, I think that's an arrestable offense, isn't it? Or I don't believe you're allowed to show up with a firearm.
It would depend on the local jurisdictions. It would depend on the local jurisdictions. When the Black Panthers, complying with California law, showed up in Sacramento at the state capitol, there was this enormous negative reaction in the passage of new laws, even though the Panthers were complying with the law. We have in a couple of states laws that say you cannot bring water to people standing in line to vote because that's voter interference. You can't leave the line to go get a drink of water or go to a bathroom. You have to give up your place in line. And clearly those are tactics designed to minimize people's ability to exercise their right to vote. I mean, this is the reasons that the 1965 Voting Rights Act was passed, along with the 64 Civil Rights Act, have not gone away, even though John Glover Roberts, our Chief Justice of the United States, insists that everything has changed. Nothing's changed. And suppression is not simply of black voters in the South. Let's remember, indigenous peoples in Arizona and California have faced big hurdles, especially Arizona, to vote for decades, maybe the entire century and a dozen years that Arizona has been a state, or 14 years. But this is something society's going to have to work through, and it's going to take time. And it's unfortunate we are probably going to see some acts of violence that statistically are insignificant, but that politically are very disturbing, given that our democracy is almost 250 years old.
Indeed. And it is true that certain states have considered restrictions, more restrictions on polling places, even in relation to that comment, as some have loosened restrictions. Many, as I say, at least 5 have considered increased restrictions, those are associated with firearms. But it's interesting to hear you say, wow, we just have to kind of grow out of it. I mean, that's scary.
Well, in the sense that, I mean, we have to get past this as a matter of people becoming familiar with it. You know, when the 19th Amendment took effect in 1920 and women obtained the right to vote universally in the United States, the way the law was implemented basically was that white women could vote, especially privileged white women, who were a much smaller share of all white women at the time. And we're going through this period because of this cockamamie Supreme Court decision that everybody has a right to own a gun and to carry it. And in some states, the law is you can open carry, you can conceal carry. There's a meme going around on the internet of a man with a gun, open carry, and a pregnant woman who's been raped, forced carry.
Wow.
We get a lot of crazy things that have erupted in our society in this century. And I just think it takes time for things to happen to get to a new and better policy.
Albert, what did I push to you that I wanted David to see? I had a couple of pieces of video I thought might be instructive, David. Albert, was there while Albert gets organized on that, yeah, okay, so this is something, David, this is a little bit of a needle drop, so like I don't know exactly whether or not, this is a long-form conversation that Trump was having this morning, okay? I watched it for a long time.
Oh, this is the noon. He was questioned before the Detroit Economic Club by the head of Bloomberg News.
Thank you. This is exactly it. I felt a little like you because you watched these things for a long time.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I only knew that it was scheduled.
Okay, so let's just, again, it's a bit of a needle drop. Here's Trump speaking at this economic club in Chicago. Go ahead.
And I called the head of Google.
It says Chicago.
I'm getting a lot of good stories lately, but you don't find them in Google. I think it's a whole rigged deal. I think Google's rigged just like our government is rigged all over the place.
You would break them up, in other words.
I'd do something, but you have to have, look, I give them a lot of credit. They've become such a power, and you got to give them credit for that. How they became a power is, really the discussion. At the same time, it's a very dangerous thing because we want to have great companies. We don't want China to have these companies. Right now, China is afraid of Google. Right now, China is a very powerful, very smart group of people. I will tell you that from very personal
experience. There's an example of a Chinese tech company at the moment, TikTok.
Yeah.
You initially wanted to ban TikTok. Now you like it, apparently for some reason to do with Facebook.
Yeah.
There is a decision coming up. If you became president,
yeah,
its Chinese parent would have to sell it. I think it's by January the 19th. Would you force them to do that?
So I originally had it all done. And then I said to Congress, your decision. I said, I'm not going to, pull any strings, nothing. Your decision. You make it. But I had it all done. And I said, you make it. And they decided not to make it. I didn't care if they made it or not, because to me, it was a flip of a coin. You have some real First Amendment problems. You have a lot of problems.
You just talked about Chinese technology,
the
need to defend against it.
Yeah.
TikTok and the threat people see to many kind of American children and things like that.
Yeah, but
You know,
TikTok
why
can
do
be
you
big.
no longer see
You know,
TikTok as a security threat?
I think it is a threat. Frankly, I think everything's a threat. There's nothing that's not a threat. But sometimes you have to fight through these threats. You know, you can't just, like Google. I'm not a fan of Google. They treat me badly. But are you going to destroy the company by doing that? If you do that, are you going to destroy the company? What you can do without breaking it up is make sure that it's more fair. They do treat me very badly. Oh, and he told me, no way, you're the #1 person on all of Google for stories. I mean, which probably makes sense, to be honest with you. I actually believe most of them are bad stories, but these are minor details, right? And it's only bad because of the fake news, because the news is really fake. That's the one we really have to straighten. We have to straighten out our press because we have a corrupt press. That's the one we really have.
Can I
Yeah. So he also talked about tariffs, and the guy pushed back on him on tariffs and said tariffs, are a bad idea for the reasons that actually are multiple reasons, but in addition to the inflationary aspect, he was talking about the way that it can these tariffs are actually bad for geopolitics and the way that we all now have to interact with each other, and you create hostility with your allies is what he was talking about. This is economic hostility. This is all about economics. So I thought it was interesting that he kind of called him out a bit, but you can see Trump just trumping, working it out in his mind, just filibustering, killing the clock. Didn't you feel that, David?
Oh, absolutely. And you'll notice Donald pivots from here to there when there's no here or there. I think Donald, who I think we all know at this point has very limited reading skills, Donald thinks that the word meme means me. And because notice what he did. He pivoted this to me. I'm being treated badly by the fake news. We have to straighten that out. Google's treating me badly. Yeah, that's the reason we need to have you as president of the United States, to solve your problems and your grievances, not the rest of us. Now, at least in this case, he gave some acknowledgement to the fact that these companies provide benefits to society. But nonetheless, Donald is a dictator, and he wants to be a dictator, and he is used to people accepting whatever he says as the truth. He creates his own reality. And he doesn't know anything. I mean, China is afraid of Google. I'm sorry. If you want to take a break, I'm going to roll on the floor and laugh. I mean, that's absurd. He has the political sophistication of a 7th or 8th grader.
Yeah.
And it's one of the reasons that you've seen all of these very highly educated and deeply experienced people in national security, diplomacy, international trade, and business development come out against Trump, including 40 of the 44 people who served in his cabinet. He's an ignoramus, and he's managed to persuade a lot of people that he's this genius, and it is astonishing to me, his success at doing that. I mean, it is the reason I call him the world's greatest con man.
It is a remarkable thing that he has. It seems clunky to me. The con seems clunky, but it clearly is not for a lot of other people, or somehow his anger is enough to get them to look past the clunkiness. There's another, Albert, go ahead and play that little mashup that I grabbed for you. This is a little bit more of Trump. This is off of whatever this podcast is called. Go ahead.
And you were right, by the way, Chicago.
Kamala Harris keeps telling us to watch Donald Trump's rallies.
No,
the old man's getting darker and more deranged.
This is not. It's a little ahead of this. I gave you the time code on it. The chip starts at 39 or something. I think. I don't recall. I sent it to you earlier this morning. But if you look, there's a timestamp on it. Anyway, I don't need to see him, but I needed to see Trump in the mashup. There is. While we wait for that, there are more than 230 doctors now and healthcare providers calling on Trump to release medical records.
Right.
Kamala Harris just released hers. He's hidden his medical records, like a squirrel hides nuts for the winter. What's happening there, David?
Well, Donald is never going to release his medical records, all right? He's given us a letter, a made as instructed letter from one of his doctors. He did this before. one of the things I can tell you is from when I first covered Donald 36 years ago till very recently, there is an enormous decline in his cognitive abilities. And we saw this most on display where he brings up, why don't we have some music? And he spends 39 minutes on a stage doing his little, slight move, old stiff white guy dance for 39 minutes. He clearly has serious problems connecting A to B, much less A to F and G. And I think Kamala Harris has hit the right theme on this politically. Show us your records, Donald. I put all of my medical records out there. And then the reason he won't show them to you is he's weak. And that's probably one of the best things she can say about Donald. First of all, infuriate him. And I predict to you that over the next 3 weeks, Donald will say crazier and crazier things as as Kamala Harris baits him. She knows exactly how to let attacks on her roll off her back, but she's very good at baiting Donald. And Walz has been baiting him as well. So I think pushing he's afraid, he is weak, he's unstable. Those are smart political moves by Harris. And then the other problem I think she has to really focus on is this bizarre development in which a significant minority of black men, polls are showing, younger black men under 30, say they're going to vote for Trump. And Barack Obama has been out calling these guys out and saying, man up and get rid of this notion that a woman can't be president. And we'll see how successful that is in changing things. A majority of Gen Z young men who are eligible to vote, they support Kamala Harris, but only by a relatively small margin, which is really very surprising, I think.
Yeah, and a lot was made of that riff that Obama was doing at that campaign headquarters for Harris. We were saying yesterday, the audio wasn't even clean. I mean, it wasn't a set up thing that was supposed to go nationwide.
Right.
I think, but Democrats and libs, there's nothing we like to do more than light up other Democrats and libs. And so he got a lot of blowback for how can you lecture? To me, it was just, there was way too much made of that. It was just talking to a constituency. I'm a tree hugger. If he had come to us and said, hey, you guys as tree huggers, you need to, if you care about the environment, you need to do this. You need to show up. You need to blah, blah, blah. And I wouldn't resent it. I would at least process it. I thought it was a bit of a bad bust on him. But then again, I'm not a young black dude. But I wanted to now get back to that. Then I want to get to, in a second, I just want to mention, Trump, is pressing for a number of ways in which voters will not get a say at the ballot box. They're changing last-minute election structures. He's pressing for these things, for these last minute. I want to get to that in a second, but first, now I have that mashup. It's short. This is Trump, again, playing the hits, but I wanted to get your take on this.
America is known all throughout the world as Occupied America. November 5th, 2024 will be Liberation Day in America. I'm announcing today that upon taking office, we will have an Operation Aurora at the federal level to expedite the removals of these savage gangs. And I will invoke the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. Think of that. We're going to take care of your water situation, and we'll force it down his throat. And we'll say, Gavin, if you don't do it, we're not giving you any of that fire money that we send you all the time for all the forest fires that you have. I think the bigger problem is the enemy from within, not even the people that have come in and destroying our country. By the way, totally destroying our country. The towns, the villages, they're being inundated. But I don't think they're the problem in terms of election day. I think the bigger problem are the people from within. We have some very bad people. We have some sick people, radical left lunatics. And I think they're and it should be very easily handled by, if necessary, by National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military.
Oof.
And then a duly elected, that's good. Thank you, Albert. The duly elected
Yeah.
official, Adam Schiff, is part of that riff. He mentions him as part of the
Yeah.
radical left that need to be handled. Can you speak to that, please, David?
Well, Donald here is proposing and telling you he will be our dictator, not on day one, but for the rest of his life. I don't know how more clearly he could declare this. And the National Guard, by the way, is military, and it's under the control of the governors unless it's federalized. But Donald Trump absolutely will do the following if he becomes president. He will remove every general, admiral, and colonel and Navy captain who stands in his way. He will promote those captains, majors, lieutenant colonels who will do his bidding. And I've been warning about this for 9 years, that the number one sign of a military takeover and a Trumpian dictatorship would be firing these very senior officers, all of whom have taken an oath to uphold the Constitution. And that's all they take an oath to do. Grunts, non-commissioned officers like sergeants, corporals, and privates, they all take an oath to uphold the Constitution and to follow the orders of the president. Our military officers do not do that. It is one of the reasons that our military is so careful about understanding civilian control. Trump has made it very clear that he wants to arrest General Mark Milley, who was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He wants to arrest other military people. And the idea that you're going to send American troops, whether they're from National Guards that you federalized or from the regular Army and other services, to round up Americans you don't like, to round up people who are here illegally or without permission or in some status Trump doesn't like, is so offensive to the rule of law, to the notion of what America is. And notice all of this, Donald always wraps in his grievances about how he is so badly treated. It's just awful, except he doesn't cry like that. But there's a word to describe his appeals to the wrongs he imagines have been done to him. It's pathetic. It's pathetic. And he's a little man. We should treat him like what he is. He's a little man. He's actually a 13-year-old boy trapped in a sick, weak old man's body.
And those who have served with him say that very thing, David. They say that very thing.
And you know, when I was covering him back in the late 80s and early 90s intensively, my best sources were his senior executives. They were ratting him out all the time because he was horrible to them. He would lie to them. He would set them up for trouble, almost like it was sport for him. He had no loyalty to anybody. He had no loyalty to his customers. I mean, he would literally, the staff when he was in town in Atlantic City would want him to hand the keys to some pretty big gamblers, not whales, people who bet $1 million a time, but big gamblers. And he would go to their dinner table and he'd insult them. Well, I'm so glad you're here to give me all your money. You know, this is not good business practice. So they learned to minimize that. Whereas, you know, Steve Wynn came to your table, you would the rest of your life talk about what a charming, wonderful fellow Steve Wynn was, when in fact he was going to take all your money. Donald he didn't have anything. He has no ability to see the world beyond himself. And that so many millions, tens of millions of Americans can't see that says a lot about what's happened to our education system. For a long, long time, I've argued, and I know if there's social studies teachers listening, they're not going to like what I'm about to say, but I don't believe we are in a meaningful way teaching civics anymore, social science. When I went to junior high school in California, in Santa Cruz, you had to pass a test in 8th grade where you had to be able to at least explain the textbook version of how an idea becomes a bill, becomes a law. You had to be able to explain the fundamentals of the Constitution. I can't tell you how many young people I've talked to in the last 15 years or so who think presidents rule by edict. And if you believe that, then a lot of what Donald Trump is doing sort of makes sense. Well, Donald will get in there and he'll do this and that. However, he now has this Supreme Court immunity ruling that any official act of the president is beyond review by anyone. And as an official act, he could do all sorts of horrible, horrible things.
Yeah, I mean, oddly, the edict of a president has more and more power now as a result of that to which you referred, SCOTUS,
Yeah.
that decision.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell, you'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.